Welcome to Women of a Certain Stage, the podcast redefining how we think about menopause. I'm your host, Lauren Chiren, a passionate advocate for breaking the stigma and empowering individuals to navigate this transformational stage of life with confidence and clarity. Here, we're diving into a new era of menopause support, featuring expert advice, real-life stories, and actionable insights. Whether you're curious about building your personal menopause plan or you're looking to make an impact, you're in the right place. Let's embrace the change together. Ferhat, I am so super excited to have this opportunity to chat with you today and to be able to share some of your expertise or have a snippet of some of the golden nuggets that I've learned from you over the years with everyone that's listening today. So, Dr. Uddin, welcome to the Women of a Certain Stage podcast.
Thank you.
And I would love to invite you to share with people a little bit about your background and who you are.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm super excited to be here today. And likewise, you are someone that's inspired me hugely along the way. And it's always a privilege to speak to you. I've been a GP I've been a doctor for more than 20 years. And then as a GP, I've always had a special interest in women's health. It's something I've just always been drawn to. And I think being a female GP, you do see more women and you see the need. You see where women are either not getting the right service, haven't been told the right things, they're being fobbed off. And it's just become a passion of mine to really help fill those gaps. And the first, I would say the first area of need I came across was menopause because it was being done so badly within our profession. And women who had stark symptoms of the menopause were being told that it was nothing, they should just carry on, just ignore them. But then I started to see more women leaving work because they couldn't get up, they had no help with these symptoms. And I just felt something needed to be done. So outside of my own practice, I sort of took it on to start educating other GPs about hormone replacement therapy, that it wasn't this big scary thing that everyone had been made to feel it was.
Yeah.
And within the profession, there was still so much fear around prescribing. Just getting other GPs up to speed,
And
why it was so important.
I'm curious.
Carry on.
No, sorry, I think we had a bit of a lag there. So I'm curious, what did you do to get yourself up to speed? Because what I understand and what I'm definitely hearing from other GPs and other medics over the last 10, 11 years since I've been working in this space is that there isn't mandatory training on periods or fertility or menopause or anything in between. So how did you get to the point of recognizing that there was a need to both create a better service for your patients, but also to be able to provide that education for other GPs as well? What did you do to kind of bolster your own knowledge, I guess, is what I'm trying.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of reading around. There are resources out there. You're absolutely right. These are resources that I never was exposed to in medical school. We didn't even have a single module on menopause. Yes, the menstrual cycle was in there in reproductive health, but it was very much, just the science. There wasn't the practical side of it. And there definitely wasn't anything about hormone replacement therapy. So looking out for resources, and there were few and far between when I was looking, and there are so many more now. That women are GPs are spoilt for choice. I really love the resources from the Primary Care Women's Health Forum, because it's just the most just detailed but understandable information for GPs to be able to follow. So if you're a GP listening out there and you're not already a member of the Primary Care Women's Health Forum, get on there. It's the most amazing resources on there. So we can all upskill ourselves. And we have this amazing medical community amongst us where we are all happy to help each other. And I've always had an open door policy at work where anyone could come in and just ask me
Mm.
a quick question on women's health, and I loved helping. And I think we're all a bit like that as a profession. So there are definitely ways of upskilling. But Lauren, what I would say now is I find that more of my patients are more upskilled than I am. I feel that women are so knowledgeable now. We've done so much in terms of educating our women, and it's fantastic that they come in and they tell me, this is what I've read, this is what I've heard, and I think this is what I need. And I love that empowerment.
And do you
It's
think
fantastic.
and do you think they're being signposted to trusted sources, reliable sources of information? Do you find the majority of people are coming in and they've got good, solid information, or do you think there's still a
Mm.
lot of myth and confusion that's out there?
Yeah, there is, and that's the only sad part. I feel that there is such a wealth of information, but actually, you're absolutely right that there is still difficulty in deciphering the good information from the not so evidence-based information. Um, and that's the tricky thing, and it's just making sure that you're speaking to experts who are giving you the right information
And I think
and
that's
deciphering it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I'm so grateful to you for being someone who's willing to support me in educating my menopause coaches on the Become a Menopause Coach diploma. And the fact that you've been there live, you're contributing towards their education, keeping the students current as they're going through their journey. It is absolutely invaluable, I think, for people to have that current, up to date, science backed, research based knowledge and information. And I keep myself abreast of what's coming out, make sure that I'm reading as many papers as I can. But there's nothing quite like having someone who is in the front line, who is working with patients on a day to day basis. And the fact that you're supporting other doctors as well, I think, is absolutely invaluable. So, what lights you up? What actually, you're working with these incredible people. You've taken it upon yourself to build your knowledge and make sure you're current and up to date. But what lights you up when you're in the working space?
Um, my moment of pure joy is when that lady walks back into the room and she walks in with that spring in her step. So she's left in the last consultation just downtrodden. Life is awful, threatening to leave her job, and she walks back in with that spring in her step, and you just know that things have changed, and that's what lights me up. Um,
Yeah.
I think that in itself is a huge reward. That transformation, that ability to say, I can do this, and I'm feeling better, and I'm going to go get that promotion, or I'm going to carry on doing the sports that I thought I was going to have to drop, or I can drive more than half an hour, and it's not going to, I'm not going to get anxious anymore. So those
Yeah.
I can do's are what lights me up.
So I definitely met you too late, because I left my job before I even considered going to my doctor. And it didn't even dawn on me, given that I was in my early 40s, that what I was experiencing was menopause, the loss of confidence, the inability to get any sleep. Some nights, if I got 2 hours sleep, I thought I was doing well. And I definitely got
Wow.
to the point where, I guess because I wasn't having hot flushes, I didn't know my period to stop because I was on contraception that meant I didn't have a bleed anyway. And it didn't dawn on me that, having had my son at 37, feeding him for a year and then being on contraception that meant I didn't have a bleed, that I never had restarted my periods after having my son. So what would you say to someone about when they should start to be aware of what perimenopause is, how that might manifest? Because I know we've had some really good conversations about, the type of metabolic changes that can happen, the fact that there's so many people that are being on the precipice of, metabolic syndrome as well. So there's a lot of things that are happening because people don't know what the role of estrogen primarily in the body is, and the other hormones as well, and how critical that is to so many of the body systems that we have and processes that we go through. So what sort of things would you be saying to people to look out for, and why?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's such a good question. And I think it's so much harder, isn't it, when you're not having periods, when you've been given a form of contraception where you don't know where you are with your cycles. And so I think if you were having periods, it is somewhat easier when your periods are changing. That's always a big clue. When your cycles are getting shorter, your periods are becoming longer or shorter. That's a real clue. But it doesn't happen to every woman. Not every woman will have that change. Some will have regular cycles right up to the point of menopause where they suddenly just stop. So it can be more subtle. And in fact, one of the things you mentioned was that lack of confidence that you suddenly started to experience. Those psychological symptoms, that brain fog, the lack of sleep, if those are out of character for you, that is a sign maybe you're in your early 40s, even earlier. That's the likely stage where perimenopause is starting to show some effects. Our estrogen levels are changing, and like you just said, Lauren, estrogen it's so important in so many areas. Yes, it's causing all these symptoms. It can cause the hot flushes, it can cause the anxiety, that lack of confidence, but it's also having these changes internally. And one of the things that you might notice is weight gain. We talk about this, the midlife tire, and it literally just comes out of nowhere. You're not eating anymore, you haven't stopped exercising, nothing's changed, and you're developing that fat. And it's that's the metabolic change that's going on. That's the first sign. Or maybe you're having more cravings, maybe you're having more dips in your blood sugar where you're reaching out for sugary foods, or you're getting dizzy or fatigued in the middle of the day. That's a sign that there are metabolic changes going on due to that lack of estrogen, which we know estrogen supports our blood sugar metabolism. It helps with our lipid control. As you know, it affects all of our functions in our body, but there are those subtle signs that something's changing, and that is when I would reach out for some help.
And what sort of help if someone comes to you and says, "Look, don't know what's going on, Doctor Uddin, help." What are the first things that you're going to do with somebody who's experiencing these changes, can't quite put their finger on it, is probably like most people I speak to is incredibly frustrated that they've tried everything. They've probably been drawn into buying every product on the market, trying every diet, going every exercise regime, and it's just at their wits' end. So, where do you start with somebody like that?
So, one thing that I find is really useful is a symptom diary. Track your cycles. So, even if you're on a contraceptive method where you're not having periods, you're still having cycles. You may just not realize, but with the perimenopause, the symptoms will take on a cyclical pattern. There will be a week or maybe 2 weeks where your symptoms are particularly worse. You may have a week, 2 weeks where you feel great and on top of the world. So start mapping those symptoms, start writing them down. There are some great resources out there. So the Balance app is fantastic. You can actually map your symptoms on the Balance app. Or I use something called the Green Climacteric Scale, where you can just look at all these symptoms and actually be like, oh, quite a few of these would apply to me. So doing that for 3 months before you go and speak to your GP can be super helpful. And also it just verifies to you that I'm not going crazy. This is real. There is something that is changing.
Yeah, I think that mapping of symptoms and 3 months can maybe sound a bit like a long time before they go and speak to anybody. So, what would you say to someone that is really the anxiety aspect has kicked in quite badly. And, I hear what you're saying about 3 months, and I understand why, because we're changing so much during perimenopause, and getting that proper picture of what's going on is so beneficial for you as a GP to be able to get the accurate help and support. But what could someone be doing in the meantime as they're leading up to coming to see you or coming to see their doctor?
So anxiety, it's such a huge area. And I mean, I think it's probably one of the hardest symptoms of the menopause, more than the hot flushes for many women. Um, I would I mean, there, you don't have to wait the 3 months to come and see your GP for one. If your symptoms are troubling to you that to the point where you need help, you need to see your GP straight away. Don't let it get any worse. But if you're not sure, that's where the mapping can be really useful. If you're not sure what's causing it,
Hmm.
um, don't wait. There is still so many things that can help, and
Mm.
we've talked about this before, Lauren, that menopause is
Yeah.
not just one thing, that there is a toolkit that every
Hmm.
woman needs in midlife that can be, yes, can have HRT in it, but there needs to be so many other things in this toolkit, from
Hmm.
medication to exercise to looking at what you're eating, to CBT if it's needed. Um, and there are so many different avenues. I know I had CBT and I found it incredibly helpful for many of my symptoms. I had something called CBTI, which is CBT specifically for sleep, and it
Mm.
made a big difference in my ability to deal with my menopausal sleep deprivation. And it's different things for different people, but and what works for someone else might not work for you, but it's still worth a try.
Yeah.
And then overarchingly, I think when you see your GP, there is no harm in asking for a trial of HRT.
Mm.
If and this is it, sometimes you might be met with resistance. You might have someone say, well, your symptoms are quite wishy-washy, could just be stress. But actually, yourself, that if this is out of character for you, Lauren, for example, you were dealing with a high functioning job for so many years of your life, and you managed it easily. Nothing was stopping you until that point where you knew that wasn't you.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you've been juggling so many balls in the air for so many years, and suddenly there's something different. You're not able to juggle those balls anymore. There is no harm in saying, right, I need a trial. I want to see if 3 months of HRT makes a difference for me. And that's the litmus test.
Yeah.
Does it help? If it does, it quite possibly is your hormones.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I definitely wish that I'd known you a long, long time ago. Obviously we're both still seeing people who are in quite a tragic situation before they get the right help and support, or even associate their experience with menopause. And yet when listening to you just now, it sounds so obvious, but it sounds so obvious to me now, having spent 11 years studying menopause and working in this space, in the same ways it sounds obvious to a new mum who's pushing a buggy along the street, who sees other mums with other babies and buggies, and they know everything about buggies, know everything about their babies, and it's obvious when you're going through it, but you would never think about a buggy or a baby before the point at which you started, having that thought pattern or desire for yourself. And I think that whilst we're working in the space, and I think we're keeping ourselves up to date, there are still millions of people out there who don't have access to this information. Now, one of the words you mentioned when you were talking before was lipid. Can you talk to me a little bit more about what is a lipid, and what's the relevance of that when it comes to menopause and HRT?
Oh, absolutely. So there is a lot of talk about lipids, and especially lipids when it comes to women, because we all know there are good fats. So lipids is essentially the name of a fat, and you can have good fats and you can have bad fats. Our bodies need lipids. Our brains are made up of fats. The whole concept, I know a few years ago we all went on low fat diets, didn't we? Because we were told fat is evil. Do not eat fat. And we've now come full circle. Fats are not evil, they are not the enemy, and we need fats, but we need good fats. And within our bloodstream, we can see that we have different types of lipids. And we have HDL, high density lipid, which is a good fat. We have LDL, which is, well, it's controversial, but most people say that's the bad fat. Triglycerides, it is very controversial at the moment. Triglycerides, which are deemed to be bad fats. And actually, Lauren, it's about the balance. We need to have the right balance of these fats within our systems, because if we don't, it can lead to atherosclerosis, which is the furring up of our arteries, of our heart, our brain, leading to heart disease, dementia, strokes. So they are the basis of many of our chronic conditions that we see later on in life. But these disease processes start now. They start at
Mhm.
midlife, which is, it's not sexy to talk about it, because it's, it doesn't sound cool, but 30 years later, you will thank yourself for having
Yeah.
talked about it or having thought about it. And we know that estrogen is very metabolically active. It causes estrogen's very favorable for our HDL, and it suppresses our LDL, it suppresses our triglycerides. So when we go through perimenopause, we do blood tests. We would have maybe had no change in our diet. We might still be exercising 5 times a week, and still see our lipids start to change. And lots of women come to me and they're like, I don't understand it. I'm training twice as hard. Why are my lipids changing? And that's your estrogen. But there are
Yeah.
absolutely things that we can do about it.
So I'm really curious. I've been reading about LDL and HDL and triglycerides for years. So as a personal trainer, as a nutritional advisor, these were things that I've been learning about over the last 25, 30 years. And the research is changing, the thinking around LDL and HDL cholesterol is changing. I think it'd be really helpful for people to understand what LDL and HDL do in terms of the transport from the liver in and out of the liver. Could you maybe give people a little bit of an understanding of what that is so that it gives a little bit more context to what these are actually doing in our body?
Yeah. So fats get laid down. Fats are actually converted from sugar. So when we have excess sugar in our bloodstream, so usually we have this, our body is usually excellent at dealing with sugars because we have insulin. Insulin is a hormone, regulates our blood sugars, keeps it within this range that's safe between 4 and 6. If it goes any higher than 6, it brings it down by taking that blood sugar and taking it into our liver or into our muscles. In our muscles, it's stored as glucagon. And if there's excess sugar, it gets stored as fats. It gets stored as good fats or bad fats, usually bad fats, triglycerides. And sometimes when we have something called insulin resistance, there's not the ability of our body to transfer those sugars into glucagon anymore, and we see this increase in these fats. And it's the increase in the bad fats that sometimes trigger problems later on, and it's the visceral fats. It's the fats that then sit around our organs, around our liver, around our heart. And you can get some really skinny people, Lauren, that I've seen who have a lot of visceral fat. So it doesn't mean just because I'm skinny, I'm not going to have these fats. Your diet and your blood tests will tell you more about actually, do you have these fats?
I love that.
But so what we know is that the balance. So again, we've got these fats. They're not all bad. They're not all good. It's the ratio of your HDL to your LDL that's important. And actually, all the research is now showing that in women, the LDL is less important. It's the HDL. And I always tell my women who come to me for these health checks that we're aiming for a HDL of above 2. Above 2 is really cardioprotective. It's going to protect your brain, it's going to protect your heart. Once your levels start slipping below 1.2, that's when you're putting your heart at increased risk. That's when you're going to see the atherosclerosis. That's when the furring up of the arteries start, because your HDL is not protecting those arteries. So, but there are things that we can do. Good fats, avocados, nuts, seeds, extra virgin olive oil, eating more fiber. We know that whole grains actually boost our HDL. And there are some women I speak to about the HRT, because some forms of HRT will also boost your HDL. So it's worth knowing where you are and not shying away from these blood tests, because they can give us so much information and so much power over what steps we need to take next.
Wow. That's absolutely fascinating. I have not heard any other doctor talking about this at all. And another thing, in fact, I just did a LinkedIn post today about I'm going slightly off track here for a minute, but I did a post today on LinkedIn because I got reached out to again by a product company who wanted me to try out their product and then be a spokesperson for their product and sell it to all my clients and everyone that I come into contact with. Now, I don't promote products, and I don't, I'm a service-based company. I've always worked in service-based industries, and I know how to do my due diligence in this space. But what I don't necessarily know enough about is doing due diligence in the product space. However, the one area that I've always had a massive fascination for, partly because I've been on and off vegan and vegetarian for most of my life, with a few lapses where chicken and eggs kind of come back in. I have always been fascinated about vitamins, minerals, and the supplement industry and market. So I do
Yeah,
personally take supplements,
huge.
but I've been to the manufacturing plant where the vitamins and minerals that I use are produced. I've looked at their supply chain. I've looked at how they test everything, how they create it. I've read all their scientific papers. They've got their own scientific advisory board, and they've been around for over 30 years. So I've I keep an eye on the market in the vitamin supplement space, but I go out there and promote and sell the ones that I take because, again, I feel that it's product based and it's outside of my real wheelhouse. So, what would you say to people, just talking about lipids, talking about diet, talking about the importance of HDL being at the right level, the fact that HRT is potentially beneficial for helping manage your blood lipids. What would you say to people about the vitamins and supplements? Either what do we start needing more of as we become perimenopausal and postmenopausal?
Yeah, so important. I mean, I've recently read this book by Professor Cassandra Suzuki about she followed women in Australia for 20 years in midlife, and she did really detailed studies on these women and their vitamin deficiencies and what happened to them 20, 30 years later. And it was stark. So some of the common vitamins, so vitamin D, for example, women who had slightly lower levels of vitamin D went on to have much more cognitive problems later on in the 20, 30 years later. Ferritin, so iron, B12 again, very protective for dementia. But when you have if you have these deficiencies and they're not picked up on, you might not actually feel that bad in the present moment, but they are having effects later on in life. Or they could be causing you to feel really unwell in the short term. Um, I recently saw a lady who had terrible low mood. She was on multiple antidepressants and nothing was working. And it was only until we checked her vitamin D levels, which were in her boots, that we thought, right, this lady needs some vitamin D supplementation. And honestly, within a week, Lauren, she said to me, my mood just lifted. A week of supplements. And obviously,
Wow.
she's still on the supplements and she's gradually getting even better. But she was like, no one knew, no one thought to check that. And we don't really check our vitamin levels. We take supplements, but often these supplements are not at the right dose. We don't know what additives are in them. We don't actually know whether the fillers are good for us, and they're not targeted. So the other one I see a lot deficiencies in midlife is ferritin. So women who are perimenopausal, they're having heavier
Mhm.
bleeds, ferritin deficiencies, and the labs that we test in the NHS, I'm sorry to say, the lab, their ranges are just way too conservative. So I will see a woman and she will say, yeah, my GP said my iron levels are fine. And then she'll tell me that they were 20. I'm like, that's not fine. We need your ferritin to be 50. We know that if it's not, we see more hair loss when ferritin is below 50. We see fatigue. We see so many symptoms. So getting those levels right, taking iron supplements. B12 is the other one. I see menopausal women who like brain fog, uh, neurological symptoms, so shooting nerve pains. We check their B12 and their B12's in their boots as well, and you supplement that and suddenly their brain fog lifts. So it's not always your hormones. There's so much going on at midlife, which is why I really do urge women to get that 40, the NHS 40 plus health check, where they will check, and you should ask for them to also check your vitamins when they check your risk factors. They will check things like your lipids, they will check your sugars, and they will have a chat about menopause. But get them to check your vitamins. If you've had heavy periods, check your ferritin. If your mood's a bit low, check your vitamin D. If you've got the brain fog, ask them to check your B12. And I'm really, really passionate about these things because I've just seen so many women who this has been missed in, and we can easily fix them with supplements. So I'm not pro blanket supplements.
Yeah.
I don't think we all need to go out and take tons and tons of supplements. I honestly don't know what's in them. And I feel like the market is just not regulated very well. So like you said, you've done your due diligence, but it's hard to do that, and not every woman knows how to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you've got any more advice on how to source the right supplements.
Yeah, I think that speaking to someone, so even although I have a background in nutrition, and even although I have done my due diligence, and I do every year kind of go back around the loop, I still refer someone to someone who specializes in supplementation, in nutrition on a day-to-day basis, and that's their day job. And in the same way as I'm a qualified personal trainer, I refer people to someone who is working with people going through menopause day in, day out, right here, right now, because that's not what I'm doing. You know, I'm running a business to
Yeah.
educate on menopause and to train people to become coaches. So I bring the experts in. So I always refer people to go and see the experts rather than trying to claim to be able to give advice, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. And actually, it's what scares me in the market. It's what scares me when someone approaches me and said, "I've got this magical new product that's going to cure all ails." Today, well, I won't name check anybody, but um, I get so many approaches from product companies, and I'm sure some of them work. Whether it's genuinely working or placebo, it doesn't really matter. If someone feels like it's working, it's beneficial, it doesn't really matter. But what
Yeah.
I'm always worried about is, putting someone in a situation where they might be doing something harmful to themselves further down the line. And I think one of the things I do in my presentation when people apply to me to train to become a menopause coach, can't just sign up online, because I'm very clear that I want to make sure we've got the right people in the cohort, that people are there for the right reason, that they understand the difference between coaching and educating and mentoring. And one of the things that I want people to do is have that critical thinking, and to be able to question the validity of things that are on the market. Or we're bombarded with advertising all the time now.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to figure out fact from fiction. And we know that if you see something flashing up in your social media or in some other way consistently over the space of time, your brain starts to perceive that as fact. And
Yeah.
if you are not forcing yourself to do that critical thinking, you're going to start to believe what you see. And then we end up with people going out and spending a lot of money, sometimes even getting themselves in debt, because they're so desperate for the right help and support, so desperate to get something that's going to fix all things. And I think the UK particularly, and I see this around the world, but I do see in the UK, I was definitely brought up, in the 70s and 80s, where you're not well, you go to the doctor, you get a prescription, you get a tablet or a liquid, you take it and you get better. And that's the mindset, is that the minute you're not well, you don't look in the mirror and go, am I sleeping well, rested well, hydrating well, eating well, nourishing myself with good relationships, moving my body? Oh no, I'm not doing all of those things. So I'll go and do them, see if that helps, and then go and see my doctor. It's just like, I'm not well, I'm going to see my doctor. And I'm not, caveat to all of this, obviously, if you're not well and you need to see your doctor, you must go and see your
Yeah.
doctor immediately, right? But I think there's a lack of personal responsibility where people don't think about the way they're looking after themselves or not looking after themselves, and they just expect a prescription to go and fix everything. And one of the things I love about your approach, both with your own clinic and the work you're doing in the NHS, and just you as a general human being, is the fact that you see all of that being blended together, that there's a combination, there's a place for lifestyle, there's a place
Yeah.
for traditional medicine. And actually it's when the two worlds meet, and other worlds as well, that's when the magic happens. That when we help patients
Definitely.
and clients take personal responsibility and understand what's going on, so that they can take responsibility. Because I think often, I think when we're in a place where we've got the education or the knowledge, it can be hard to remember that not everyone knows simple things like the importance of hydration, or the importance of eating good quality proteins and fats and carbohydrates. And we can have this dialogue, but a lot of people won't know the difference between. I know, even with some of the most educated people that I work with, I'll talk about proteins and they go, can you just explain what a protein is? And I'm like, I have to remember that not everyone's been exposed to this information, and sometimes we
Mm,
have to
mm.
just get that very base level. So, when you're working in Liberty, what sort of approach do you take with your patients when they come to see you?
Completely holistic. I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to have looked at your lifestyle at least, because I could give you, all the HRT in the world, and it's really not going to make a huge difference if you're, eating processed food every night. You're not thinking about your self-care. You're not able to look at ways to stress relief. They're all intertwined. So it can be tricky. And I had this conversation with a lady recently, and she was doing no exercise. She was sitting on her sofa, just literally her diet was just chocolate. And I said to her, no amount of HRT is going to make you better in this situation. But at the same time, she did need that HRT to give her that motivation. Her joints were aching. She couldn't do the exercise. Her mood was so low that she couldn't even get to the kitchen to put a healthy meal together. So we do have to take a pragmatic view that you sometimes those changes have to come second, but as long as it's there in the picture. So I always talk about it, but it's not prescriptive. I'm never right. Off you go. Make sure you're getting your 5 fruit a day, fruit and veg a day, and then come back and see me. It's never like that. It's right. Where can we help you? What can you do? And with exercise, movement, it can be something really small, just to start with, maybe a stroll around the park. It doesn't have to be full blown hit training straight away. Whatever movement, just start slowly, build it in, gradual, do something you enjoy. And for this particular lady that I saw, she needed the HRT. She needed the HRT first to give her that boost, to get her off the sofa. And then she came back and she said, you know what? I can't remember what she said she started. She started Pilates classes, and she started looking at her diet. So it is very holistic, but that, we need to be kind to ourselves, Lauren. We need to, we need to take things slow and recognize that this is such a difficult time in our lives. We're not going to get it straight away. We're not going to transform from one day to the next. It's a process. And it's also a process, I feel, as women, we are constantly having to manage. We're constantly having to, adapt our diet, maybe add in a bit more self-care. I've decided I'm going to book myself in for a massage this week because I feel I need it this week. So we have to, it changes, doesn't it, from one week to the next?
Yeah.
Your body, you have to listen to yourself. But definitely holistic care all the way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, for anyone listening who a massage might be out of reach, then clearly, we even if it's lying down and closing your eyes in the middle of the day for 10, 15 minutes, for me, that would be a
Yeah.
luxury many times. And we've spoken before, juggling family life, juggling running a business, juggling just living in the 21st century. We are still in the 21st century. Yes, we are. I just want to double check that menopausal brain. I think that we just live on a 24/7 on world, and that's challenging. And when you're in the position of being a GP,
Absolutely.
of running your own business, being a mum, everyone else is looking to you. So I don't
Yeah.
think either you or I would underestimate the challenge that it is to find that time to make self-care. But that's where the mindset comes in. And that's where, when you decide that you have to refuel your own batteries before you can go and care for and look after everyone else, making that mindset switch to just give yourself permission to have that 5, 10, 15 minutes a day for whatever it is, whether it is activity, whether it is for self-care, whether it's for, eating something a little bit more healthy than you might normally do. Is what 1% improvement can you do day in, day out? Because those 1% improvements will add up over time. So I'm curious, I can talk to you all day long, right? Because we always get at the end of our conversations like, oh, we've run out of time. But what else have we not touched on today that you would like to share with people listening?
I think we touched on it. We touched on exercise. We touched on lipids. Sugars are something that when we hit midlife, I think it's really important that we have some concept of what's happening to our blood sugars. We're living in the Western world. We're seeing rising rates of obesity, and I think we all sort of shrug that off and say, "Oh, that's not me, and it's not my problem." But as a population, we need to be helping each other. because the problem that we are seeing now is a rise in diabetes and pre-diabetes. And this is another midlife change that I'm really passionate about, women understanding that as we hit midlife, we become more insulin resistant. The estrogen that we have, it drives the sugars into our cells, it helps the insulin work. And as we lose our estrogen, we do become more reliant on those lifestyle things that help bring those sugars down. So it's, yeah, again, what are the signs? What are the signs we're becoming insulin resistant? And one of the things is those midday cravings. We might be getting more slumps, we might be getting more tired, more fatigued, because we're having these higher peaks and troughs in our sugars that give us these sugar highs and then give us these sugar lows. We start to get more irritable. We might feel quite lightheaded. These are things to get checked early. Get your sugars checked. If you're in the pre-diabetic range, that's the warning stage. That's the stage where we need to be putting in more of these lifestyle changes. And I can't emphasize exercise enough. The more I read about it, the more benefits there are, and the more need I think as women that we build that lean muscle. It just needs to be so much higher on our priority list,
Yeah.
because I talk about the sugars and how building lean muscle will help our bodies, that drive those sugars into our muscles, so we're not getting all those problems later in life. But it's not just that, Lauren. It's, you learn about how it helps our mood, it helps prevent dementia, it's going to keep us from falls later on in life. That yeah, we
Yeah.
just need to really prioritize that above all else. And I feel like our lives would all be so much better.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was traveling recently. I did a talk over in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, and I had a very heavy bag that had to go in the overhead locker. Now, I've been qualified as a personal trainer for over 25 years now. I do lift weights, but I've been a bit lack over the last few years because there's been a bunch of other priorities. So I've taken up running and I've been doing other things. And I tried to do things where I was engaging with people socially. So, for example, doing the National Three Peaks. So I was meeting with people to go for long walks. And that overtook me doing my weight training. Now, I did that deliberately because I'm not very sociable. I'm quite introvert and I don't mix with other people. But I recognize as I'm getting older, it's very easy for me to just stay at home and be on my own and not interact with other people. And that's not good for my mental health. So I make a concerted effort to find challenges that I can then go and meet like minded people and go out and have a challenge, be with people that I've got something in common with, that I'm enjoying the time that I'm spending with them. But that has meant that I haven't done as much weightlifting. So back to my story about going to Dallas, I'm lifting my overhead bag and it was heavy. And I actually nearly dropped the flipping bag. And I was like, okay, that is a sign. That is a sign. I am only 56 and
Ooh,
I do not want to
yeah.
be in a position where I need to ask a flight attendant who's half my age to lift the bag up and top, which I should easily be able to do with one arm. So that gave me the warning sign that it was time to get back into the gym. Or not, you
Yeah,
don't have to go to gym, but I am a gym member. So I have now written myself a new program and I'm back on it. So I will next week be suffering and complaining about
amazing.
having delayed onset muscle soreness, but it's temporary. So anyone that is going,
Yeah,
into weight training that finds that they're aching and sore after they first weight train, it eases off. It's worth pushing through that pain barrier. But I think I love the point that you're making
absolutely.
about exercise or activity or movement, whichever word most
Yeah.
speaks to you, right? Because we
And I
know
think,
that,
as women, we are living longer, aren't we? But it's not just about lifespan, it's health span. It's
yeah,
about, yes, we're living longer, but we want those years to be healthier. We want those final years to be more functional years, because and that's where the gender health gap is, because women spend a quarter of their lives in poor health, whereas men spend maybe a fifth of their lives in poor health. And we need to change that. And I think what you're saying now, that recognition that, okay, if I'm not able to lift this bag today, what am I going to be like 10 years down the line? You want to increase your health span, you want to be fit and healthy and functional throughout your life, and that starts now. That starts with yeah,
yeah.
getting those working on that now, for
Yeah, and
sure.
It just goes to show that you can have all the knowledge in the world. I mean, I've worked as a PT for years. I've worked in nutrition for years, and yet we all need someone else to bounce ideas off of to keep ourselves current. I thought I was doing the right thing because I felt that I was becoming far too insular. So I forced myself to go out and meet other people and to do other challenges. And I think that in so doing, I forgot about some of the other stuff that I had to be doing. So there's no perfect.
Mm.
There's no we never got it all perfectly, all aligned. And no matter who you talk to, who you
Yeah.
listen to, every person, every person on this planet has their own challenges, their own issues. They have their own blips and bumps in the road. And I always say to people, that as human beings, we're flawed. We're flawed, and there's always something that we can improve on and do differently. And we some of us are really good at doing most of it most of the time, but and a bit like what's the expression? You can please some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. We can get it right some of the
Yeah.
time, but we can't get it right all the time. And I think
Yeah.
that when people are a little bit more honest about that, because I see so many people in the menopause space on social media that are looking great, sounding great, and only ever sharing the wonderful things that are going on in their life, that it can be
Mm.
really misleading for someone who is feeling under the weather, who is feeling very stressed, who is
Definitely.
struggling, to think that that they should
Yeah.
they should be like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And I think it's always a work in progress.
yeah.
We never, that never stops. That never stops. You never get there where you're like, I've got this sorted. I am, everything in my life is perfect. There will always be something. And I mean, that was a classic example, I think. Again, in this book that I'm reading called The Secrets of Healthy Aging, she says that her research says that how those social interactions are so important in preventing things like dementia down the line, and that people that didn't interact on a daily basis were much likely to have cognitive problems later on. So we can get our diet and our exercise right, but we might have forgotten that we need more social interactions. I mean, Lauren, it's hard, isn't it? We've got so many plates we need to be juggling, and there's just not enough time
Yeah.
to juggle them all. But all we can do is try our best, and I think that's good enough. And yeah, I think be kind to yourself, because I mean, you're doing loads, and I think we all are. We're all trying in our own way, and that's the most important thing.
I think that's such a perfect place to wrap this up, and such a positive message for everyone to realize that doing our best is all we can do. Dr. Ferhat Uddin, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your insights. And I dare say that we will catch up again and maybe record something again next year if you might be open and willing to doing that.
Love to.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Thank you for joining me on Women of a Certain Stage. I hope today's episode inspired you to think differently about menopause and the incredible opportunities this stage of life brings. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends who need to hear this message. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us reach even more people. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at Lauren Chiren, or visit our website at womenofacertainstage.com to learn more about menopause coaching, inspiring events, and corporate training. Until next time, let's continue making a difference, one conversation at a time.